In a universe of electrons and selfish genes, blind physical forces, and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt. Other people are going to get lucky. And you won't find any rhyme or reason. There is no justice. The universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no such thing as evil, no such thing as good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Richard Dawkins, in The God Delusion. This is the discussion for today. The discussion for today is there evidence inside what we know to be morality that points to the existence of a divine creator? And the discussion it's important. It's probably the lowest hanging fruit for the average person to have this discussion without having to dive into cosmology or delve into astrophysics. But instead, this really deals with the human experience. And I'll tell you what I mean by doing a little bit of an analogy. If you want to throw those first two characters up on the board. On your left, what you're going to see is a man by the name of Adolf Hitler. He killed 11 million people, 6 million Jews, wiped out 1/3 of the whole Jewish population on the planet. He used programs like eugenics to try to eliminate certain people groups, including people of different skin colors, Jehovah's Witnesses. Jews were the main culprit, but basically anyone not of the Aryan race, including people who were disabled, who had certain disabilities, Down syndrome, things of that nature. His plan was human flourishing is best when a certain race that has come to power, and why not, is able to exercise its power on other people. And if a certain group of people that is passing on these broken genes over and over again, I'm using broken from Mein Kampf, these broken genes over and over again are all eliminated, it would be true that a lot of those tendencies and those different people groups and or belief systems or even sometimes disabilities would be eliminated from the planet. He would dissect people even while they were living. He did experiments on the human brain by cutting open people's scalp without anesthesia, him and Mengele and the different things. He ought to have been tried at Nuremberg for war crimes, for gassing people, for stripping them of their human dignity, for starving them to death. The people who weren't starved to death were forced to live in fecal matter for months and months on end, many dying from the diseases brought about, separating man from child, brother from sister, mom from infant, throwing them into fires, things of that nature. On the right, you'll see a woman named Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa was also known as a saint of the gutters. She was awarded the Nobel Prize, but rejected the banquet because she insisted the money go to charity instead. Because of her efforts and the money that she was able to raise, it is reported that in the tens of thousands of people were cured of different diseases because of her altruistic behavior. She left home at the age of 13 to go pursue reaching out to the basically untouchables of India. She found her new home in Calcutta. And her work has been beatified in the Catholic Church, and she is kind of the patron saint of mercy, as it were. Which one of these is more morally upright, Hitler or Mother Teresa? Mother Teresa? How many of you guys think that Mother Teresa is more morally upright than Hitler? How many of you guys think that Hitler is more morally upright than Mother Teresa? That's almost when for a lot of other questions, people would make jokes, right? Like, right? You know what I'm talking about? Where you're like, well, how many of you don't even know what football is? There's always, whenever you ask questions to an audience, you can now expect one or two morons to go, attention, right? But this is one where even the person here with the lowest emotional quotient goes, no, I'm not raising my hand to that one. It's a universal concept that Mother Teresa is more morally upright. She's a better human being than Hitler is. The question is, on what grounds is that true? You see what we're appealing to? We're appealing to something outside of the two of them. If the two of them are in a moralistic ring with one another, asking this question of what do you think we should do with people? Well, I think humans would flourish best if we killed off everyone who had bad genes. And then one side says, no, we need to keep them alive because human value is of the utmost worth. One says that worth is the ultimate ethic, and the other one says that power is the ultimate ethic. And now who gets to vote on who wins that? And if it is a vote, is it a majority vote? Because if you're going to go to majority vote, then the Nazis didn't do anything wrong because their majority said that it was proper to do what they were properly doing. You've got whole reasons of Sharia law that if you went there right now and had the ability to stop their culture, you wouldn't be able to with a consistency in your worldview. The question that we're posing today is simple. is it possible to have objective moral values and duties without a transcendent being? Is it possible to have objective? Objective is the opposite of subjective. Subjective means it can be privy to a person, a people group, a vote, a majority, a power struggle. It can be a genetic thing. It can be a result of the whims and throws. Or I love how Dawkins puts it elsewhere in his book. He says, murder, rape, pillaging, adultery, all this is just Mother Nature throwing her clay, and we are its victims. Sorry. It's all just a result of it. And then he also goes on to say that we are all just results of our DNA, that we all dance to the tune of our DNA, which means he's a determinist, which means everything that you've ever done in your life is because you began as stardust, right? That's the cosmic understanding of our beginning as human beings on a naturalistic worldview, is that we were stardust. That stardust came into a hot goo ooze that was on the planet. That planetary ooze was hot enough that it began to replicate itself into complex amino acid chains. Those amino acid chains mutated over the generations to create eventually a more complex version of a germ. That germ became you. Okay? From goo to you via the zoo. That's the evolutionary process, right? And that's the theory. And on that, if we all began as stardust with absolutely no conscience, then where in the system of us evolving did we one day stop and go, you know what we're doing is wrong? Because when we watch a great white shark forcibly copulate with another great white shark, we don't call it rape, we call it forcible copulation. When we watch a grizzly bear kill the cub of another bear so that it can't come and eventually compete for its territory, that thing killed the other bear, but it didn't murder the bear. We don't put it on trial. And after that bear is done killing that thing, we don't walk around and go, that is an immoral bear. We would all make the same argument that their morality is bound within their DNA, that they can't choose anything else, right? Cows aren't existentialists. Bears aren't existentialists. And like no dog wakes up one day and goes, freaking bones, man, every day. All I got is bones. Eat the dog food, eat the dog food, eat the dog food. You eat the dog food. Animals don't have that ability to do that. There's something unique to mankind in particular. And the faith statement of, well, we evolved a conscience is a complete faith statement. That's absolutely never going to be proven in any kind of DNA test that you could ever do, because there is no conscience gene, like there is no justice gene. There is no love gene. There is no truth gene. There's nothing in our genetic makeup, if Dawkins is right, that would lead us to a pursuit of truth, love, justice, or anything else that comes with that. We ought to be people of survival, not of truth or morality or anything else, and yet that is against our human experience. You and I know it to be completely true that morality does not seem to be something that we choose. It seems to be something that's inbred inside of us, that we just know it innately as people. And if you disagree and you say that all morality is subjective, what you're going to find every single time is you will either come to the end of your rope and become a theist by saying, it just is okay, which is a complete faith statement, or you're going to say something so morally repugnant that you're not going to be able to deal with your own self. It's an unlivable condition to have. You find people saying, is rape truly wrong? Well, I guess I can't say it's truly wrong. And then I want you to experience that as you get older and you have kids, and then you watch your daughter get raped, and then you have to look at the person that you're accusing and say, what you did, you had to do, it was a result of your blind, pitiless indifference. You were dancing to the tune of your DNA. Then how do you really put that guy on trial? He had to do that. Do we do things to people that they have to do? No, we call that racism. We call that sexism. We call that misogyny, when we treat people a certain way because of something that's outside of their control. Therefore, a pedophile who finds people that are pre-teen or pre-adolescent or pre-puberty to be attractive, and then they force themselves on them, we ought to go, this is nature throwing her clay. And for us to impose rules and regulations on them flies in the face of our naturalistic methodological naturalism, right? We would have to say, that's fine, he has to. How do you put someone in prison for 80 years who is doing what his DNA made him do? You don't have a robot program them to do something and then kill them for doing it. That just doesn't make sense. There has to be volition. There has to be free will. There has to be those things in order for us to have any kind of a justice system whatsoever. So we have one of two things, which is either we have an objective morality, which means that that rape is always wrong. For humankind, rape is always wrong, and it doesn't matter who you are, or who votes on it, or who's in power. And if the Nazis overtook the entire planet and they continued, people group by people group, to kill people until Hitler got rid of all of the Christians, all of the Jews, all of the Muslims, all of the Jehovah's Witnesses, that you could still stand there while you were being shot and go, this is unjust. And that if there was only Hitler left standing and he chose to kill the other person that was still alive, it would still be murder, it would still be wrong, even if the only people alive were the person that was saying it is right and it was wrong. It's still, there's something bigger than Hitler that says it's wrong. Hitler doesn't get to make that decision. There's something bigger than him, which means in order for us to make a value statement on these two people, we can't appeal to something inside of the moral system itself. It's got to be outside of it, which is why today when you watch the Super Bowl, or don't watch the Super Bowl because you're Southern Californians, when you don't watch the Super Bowl and you go to the beach because it's going to be not so crowded today, you're going to see people with striped jerseys on. Those striped jerseys represent a transcendence of the game. They're not in the game, right? Which is why we don't put people out on a football field, especially in a contact sport like that, and say, govern yourselves. Because someone leads with their helmet and knocks another guy unconscious or kills another man by choking him to death, and you go, that was a foul. And they go, no, it wasn't. Now what? Do you just go, my dad can beat up your dad? Well, my dad can beat up, like, that's the end. We look over, watch a basketball game, someone gets hacked, and what do? Who do they look at? The ref. They don't look at their teammate. They don't look at the other team. They look at the ref. They appeal to something bigger. The question is an ontological question of moral compass. Is there an objective moral system of values and duties that all of mankind knows innately, or is all morality subjective? And we want to test those two theorems and understand what they are. Now, what's very important with this discussion, the premises go like this. Luke, if you want to throw up the premises slide, is without God, or if there is no God, then there is no sound foundation for objective moral values and duties. If God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. On the right, you'll find a man named Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant said that the things that keep him up at night are twofold: cosmology and morality. He said, what really brings me pause in my life is the starry host above and the moral law within. And the moral law within is what we're talking about. It's this innate feeling we have as people of what is right and wrong. And when people have a different sense of what is right and wrong, we still point at them and say, you're wrong, or your culture is wrong, as if we're allowed to appeal to something bigger than our culture. How do we not just practice cultural elitism when we say another culture is wrong? How do we not just go, my culture is better? Why? Because there's more of you, because you're white, because you're tall, because you're powerful, because you're rich? That has nothing to do with morality. Morality can be done in the gutters of Calcutta, and we said that she was more moral than Hitler, who had all the power and money in the world, right? Not all of it, you know what I'm saying? But proportionally, he absolutely did, compared to Mother Teresa. But what she did in the gutters of Calcutta with the untouchables was of greater moral value than Hitler, who had the power, authority, justice, power, and money to do whatever he wanted with. Okay? So morality is not tied to power. It's not tied to money. It's not tied to any of those things in terms of who gets to make those calls. So Immanuel Kant said, this is very disturbing to me. As someone who doesn't believe in God, Immanuel Kant said, it brings me pause. Why do I know what you know and you know what I know? And when we write or read things that go against our morality, it's upsetting to us. It's very upsetting to us, right? There's a guy named Steven Pinker who was an atheist thinker. If he doesn't call himself that, he is really missing an opportunity here. My name is Steven Pinker, the atheist thinker. There was a girl, I think her name is Melissa Hardy in New York. She went to her senior prom, and she was 9 months pregnant, but no one really knew about it. She gave birth and then threw her kid in the trash can in the bathroom, choked it with the umbilical cord, threw the baby in the trash can, and then went back and finished dancing in her senior prom. And people went on an outrage. They were freaking out. They were so mad. They were just saying, like, this is what our world has come to. It was kind of this pinnacle story of the immorality of this generation. And Steven Pinker comes back and he goes, is there going to be any consistency in our worldview, Pinker says? As an atheist, he goes, why are we so afraid of being consistent in our worldview? She didn't do anything wrong. Infanticide has been part of the human race has been part of the animal race for generations and generations, and it's what hippos do, it's what other people do. It's everyone does it in the animal kingdom. And if we are truly just animals, leave her alone. If she wants to give birth, tie an umbilical cord around her baby's neck, pull as hard as it can until that baby turns blue, and put it in the trash can, that's her prerogative. Does anyone enjoy, like anyone sitting there going, that actually makes sense? No, because while it might intellectually be consistent with that worldview, it flies in the face of everything innately what we believe as people. I've never met anyone who reads that story and goes, yeah, you're right. Because if you agree with that story, what would be innately different about me walking into your home and shooting you in the head and going, people have been killing people for generations. Bears kill bears. Hippos kill hippos. Crocodiles kill crocodiles. And if we're evolved from them, then who are you to say that stardust all of a sudden has a moral compass that I should be accountable to? It's completely against our human experience. So you either end up saying something that is so morally repugnant that it's almost laughable, or you become inconsistent in your worldview by saying something against your worldview. On atheism, I need you to prove to me through a naturalistic methodological approach that A, Melissa Hardy did something morally repugnant, or that Hitler did something that was inappropriate, or that the way that we treat women in foreign countries, and historically even in America, that women have innate value and ought to have the same values that men do. And you're going to have a really hard time doing that. I would even say, without borrowing theological capital, without borrowing ethics from God himself, you will have an impossible time proving to me that there is no objective moral value when it comes to those things, but we ought to all obey it. If there is no God, morality is preferential. That is it. It's only preference. Is rape wrong? No, I just don't like it when people do it. That is the consistent worldview. So the argument is, well, what if all morality isn't objective? What if it's all subjective? First of all, that asks the question of epistemology, not the question of ontology. So you've already begged the question, which is to assume that there is something that we're aiming for, okay? That there is an objective truth. And some people go, well, there is one, and here's how we found it. Through an evolutionary process, we arrived there. But the question isn't, how did we get there? The question is there something that is bigger than opinion? And so even the greatest atheistic thinkers, like Sam Harris wrote this book called The Moral Landscape, which was supposed to be this landmark, like truism in all of atheism. And then he finished writing it, and I read it, and I went, this is brilliant, but you missed the whole question. Yes, if there was no concept of anything else, and the question was, what makes the most sense on naturalism, why people tend to act a certain way? You're right. This is great, the human flourishing. But you begged a few things, and we'll talk about that here in a second. To beg the question means you assume something that we didn't agree on. That's a formal fallacy in logic. Premise 2 is that objective moral values and duties do exist, okay, which is modus tollens. We have rejected the consequent, and therefore our premise follows logically if from the conclusions, therefore God exists. We must disprove premise 1 or premise 2 false in order to falsify that account. So we will start with the first premise, which is if God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. If you want to go to the next slide, let's put the rejection of premise 1 to the test. Can we reject premise 1? Which, again, it isn't how do we come to know these laws? It is there a law there? And the majority of all of mankind would say, yes, there is a law there. And they would go, but we came to know it through evolution. But you didn't answer the question. You said yes. So you said, yes, there is an objective moral law. But we arrived there from an evolutionary construct, which that you made a category error then. Yes, there is objective moral truth, but we arrived at it through evolution. What's the problem with that? Could we have evolved a different way, and we'd have a different set of ethics on that same worldview, where rape would be perfectly great and murder would be awesome? Wouldn't it be possible on the throwing of the clay of genetic mutation that the morality that we see, if we evolve differently, would be completely different? Yes? Wouldn't there be a construct if that were true, if everything was just a result of that, if it was all utilitarian, that what we understand to be flourishing and pain could have evolved to become something completely different? Even the idea of pain in general didn't have to exist, period. So you're borrowing capital over here by saying, well, here's how we arrived at the objective truth that we have. Well, then it's not objective. If it could have come a different way and been a different morality, then it's not objective, it becomes subjective. It means it's subject to how we evolved. So no, there is only one way with objective moral values, and that is through God, that is through a divine being. If it's through evolution, it's subjective. If it's majority, it's subjective. If it's opinion, it's subjective. It's utilitarian, it's subjective. Utilitarian, think about the word utility. It means it works the best, okay? That's one of the most popular views. So on the left, people have made the argument, well, what about the argument from majorities? What if we, on the subjective worldview, what if we all evolved, what if morality is just whoever's in power? So it goes like this. In any scenario, what is right and wrong is determined by the hand of power being the authority, being the majority or the agreed upon rule of law. Here's the issue with that. Let me take you to a scenario. You live in this 18th and 19th century America, and you are living in the South, and you believe that men and women have intrinsic human worth that is endowed by them by their creator, not by their skin color, not by how much money they have, and yet you live in a place where slavery is rampant. And even religious people are using their proof texting false biblical texts in order to say that slavery is okay. And now you live there as a Christian and you're going, I believe humans have innate worth, regardless of skin color or who's in power or who's richer or who can inflict their will on people. I believe that people have innate human value. How many of you in this room believe that mankind has innate human value? It's not dictated by their gender or their race. They are valuable just because they're a human, not because they're white or black or anything else like that. You just believe people have humans have intrinsic value. They just are valuable. Okay, good. If you didn't, wow. Let's talk afterwards, right? Here's the issue. If that's our morality and we believe that that is right, what would happen if you woke up in 18th century America and people were owning slaves and doing all these things? And what if you woke up one day and you are Harriet Tubman and you're running the Underground Railroad? Is what you're doing moral or immoral? It's a hard question. Based on the law, is what you're doing moral or immoral? Immoral. Based on morality, is what you're doing moral or immoral? Moral. And here's the problem. That means you could be running the Underground Railroad doing the exact same thing every single day. And then all of a sudden, there's a vote, and all slaves are freed, and now what you're doing is moral. So how could an action continue with the exact same circumstances? The only thing that changes is the hand of power, and the exact same action goes from immoral to moral overnight. Do you want to live in a world where all of a sudden tomorrow what is immoral and moral switches completely? We would make the argument that that person is doing a moral, that's why we still platform them. We don't put them subject to their culture, do we? Who are the heroes of the Reformation, of the emancipation of slavery in America? Give me some of the heroes. Good. Abe Lincoln, who else? Frederick Douglass, who else? Harriet Tubman, good. That's softball, okay? These are the heroes. But based on this, we would say they were villains. They were wrong. They were evil. They were doing something immoral. It was wrong for them to do that. But we don't. What we say is their morality was progressive in a very immoral system. They knew what was right even when everyone else was doing what was wrong. We don't go, they were doing what was wrong when everyone else was doing what was right until it was right, and then they were doing what was right when everyone else was doing what was wrong. So the problem with majority is you can't then walk into Nazi Germany and go, knock it off. Stop. Unless you make the argument that the whole world has to vote on it. But that's arbitrary. And when it comes to that, what if in my household, I can use my kids however I want? Hit them however I want. Cut them however I want. Kill them however I want. You go, well, the state, the frick says the state's in control. The federal government? Who gave them the power to dictate the state is control? We just all think that. I don't think that. Well, there's more of us than there is of you. But there's more Nazis than there were non-Nazis. Are they right and they're wrong? My worldview's inconsistent, right? That's what it comes down to. What vote? Familial vote? What about you and me? If I vote I can hit Elliot and he votes I can't, who wins? And if Nick says you can hit him, now it's 2-on-1. Now can I hit him? And you see, it's an infinite. It's a taxi cab fallacy. It's an infinite regress. It just keeps going over and over again. So to say, oh no, that would work, but then all of a sudden you go, well, what about on a bigger universal scale? No, that can't be the case. Why? Why does it morph? It's reductio ad absurdum. Why would this argument morph just because we keep adding people to it? 7? 8? 9? 13 million? 15 million? You get at some point you'd have to stop and go, 3,476? That's it. That's the cap. And when you can't do that, then this doesn't work. It's to reduce the argument to its most natural, logical, simplistic state. So I said, if it's 1 and 1 and we vote against each other, can I hit you? You say no. If he says yes, I can. And if you go, even if you both vote that you can't, then you've proven my point. It's not about majority. It's that simple. The argument from utility. Right and wrong is a product of whatever causes the greatest amount of human flourishing and minimizes human pain. Okay? Even on a base level of logic, there's 3 different things that are begged in this thing. Begged means it's assumed even though we didn't agree on it. The first one being right and wrong, both begged. Okay, that's just one though. Is a product of whatever causes the greatest amount of human flourishing. That's to assume that we all agree what human flourishing is and what causes human flourishing. And minimizes pain. And that means we all also have to agree what pain is, which is very difficult to do. This is the Mother Teresa, Adolf Hitler argument. You put them in a ring and you say, Adolf, morality is whatever increases human flourishing and decreases human pain. And he goes, okay, I'm going to kill all the Jews. It's eugenics. We're going to kill everyone who's got a deformity or who's got a certain Down syndrome or who's got a mental disability or who's black or gay or Jewish, Jehovah's Witness, groups of Christians. We'll get rid of them. Then the ones left over will finally, it's like Thanos, we'll finally get to live in peace. And we'll keep procreating better people, and it'll be better, and everything's going to be good. And Mother Teresa is going to sit there going, what did you just say? Human flourishing is you get into the depths of the gutters of India and you serve and you love people and you bring up orphans and you adopt them and you take care, you raise money for them. You reject the Nobel Prize so that you can have more money. Instead of throwing a banquet, you can feed 100,000 people. Are you insane? And they both show up to Dachau. They both show up to Auschwitz. Who's right? Who wins? The history of our species and the evolution of man says that Hitler is. Because he's more powerful. Because in that moment, he could have gone, you too. Boom, she's gone. And in a silverback gorilla, if he decides you're not part of my tribe anymore and they eliminate him, it's like we go, oh, look, he's competing. That's all he's doing. Unless you want to make an argument on naturalism that humans of all other species have some innate value greater than anything else, and you can't be a speciesist when you do that. It's very difficult to do. You go against your natural worldview, which is stardust, comprehensible, imaginative, creative, irreconcilably complex, conscious, existential being all of a sudden. On theism, I can tell you the difference. God made everything but breathed himself into mankind. He breathed the nefesh chaya, the ruach of God in the Bible. It says in Genesis chapter 2, he breathed life into man. And so we have the imago Dei, the image of God built on us, which is how we understand morality as people. Whether you're a Christian or not, we understand morality at its base level, and we have a consistent worldview in which to understand that. So utility assumes so many things. And on 9/11, a man named Muhammad Atta got onto an airplane and flew it into the South Tower of the World Trade Center, killing upwards of 2,000 people, and about 4,000 people were killed that day across the different terrorist attacks. Was he a hero or a villain? It's all who you are. If you were born in America, you probably think he's a villain. If you were born in that region of Pakistan, you think he's a hero. And if you go, well, we're right because there's more of us, you've just gone to the rule of majority. And if you say, well, we're right because we're better people, then you've begged the question of what is better. And if you say, well, we're right because we're more moral, then you have said this is what human flourishing is. And what's the problem is that when he says that's what human flourishing is, there's no transcendent truth to say who's right and wrong. It's all just everyone's opinion. Without objective morality, everyone just tosses their opinion forward, gets indignant at the other party, and then walks away. There's no reasonable purpose for us putting people in jail or executing people. Nothing. Nothing is justified. Nothing's justifiable. In genetics, right and wrong are a byproduct of our genetic heritage and have been passed down through a Darwinian process. The issue with that is the very nature of what we consider to be moral, even in our culture, is almost innately counter-Darwinian. And when you are pressed to be Darwinian, which was supposed to evolve us into these moral beings, well, our ancestors were cooperative, so we're cooperative. Well, monkeys work in social groups and it passes on their species. Therefore, we do. What question have you begged? The survival of a species is good. No one agreed to that. Who agrees? Some people disagree. So you go, well, they don't matter. Then now give a reason why they don't matter. But you can't use majority, subjectivity, genetic processes, because they are not allowed to go against your genetics, because that's how genetics work. Cows don't get to choose. Like beavers don't wake up someday and go like, I'm tired of building dams. I'm going to go hang out with my girlfriend on the beach, right? They don't do that. So they don't have the ability to do that. So you got to be consistent with your worldview. Genetics, as it were then, pushes us to survive, not to seek truth, morality, justice, all those things. And on a strictly materialist worldview, everything in morality can't be tested in a lab. Is touching children right or wrong? Inappropriately. So, but they don't go, I believe in science. Now prove to me scientifically that touching a kid is wrong. Do you like look in their brain and go, look, it causes pain? Yeah, but what if it brings me pleasure? And what if we find out that it brings me more pleasure than it brings them pain? What if we find out that some 7-year-olds like it and now they're both brought pleasure? Is it still wrong? You guys get how quick the worldview just goes, just crumbles. There's nothing to it. It's like an overbaked cookie. It just falls apart. I don't know if that's how cookies work, but I would assume. So, what is our basis for morality? A theistic view. Keep going. Morality is grounded in someone. Morality is a reflection of a nature of something. What we know to be good and what we know to be bad and what we know to be obligatory and what we know to be counter-obligatory have everything to do about the nature of someone. This is the only consistent worldview. This is the only time that we can pitch morality and whatever culture, whatever has been, whatever will be, and say there is an objective standard. Why is Mother Teresa right? Because she valued human life. Why is that proper? Because those people were made in the image of God. God calls for the beneficence of the sick, of the lonely, of the downtrodden, of the poor. He says this is true Christianity in the New Testament. To love the poor, to love the widow, to take care of those who are in need. Therefore, I can tell you 100% why Mother Teresa is good. Why is Adolf Hitler bad? Because he devalues human life. He takes people who are made in the image of God and says that they are lesser than. He enslaves people against their will, which goes in the face of his idea of free will as a man, as a God. He promotes these different values. He is love. He is justice. Hitler was not loving. Hitler was not just. God is a God of faithfulness. He's a God of protection. He's a God of safety. He's a God of great passion. And everything that Hitler did, it wasn't just that he wasn't being a good person. It's that he wasn't being a godlike person. And what we understand to be true about goodness is it aligns with the character of the God revealed in Scripture. And what we understand to be badness or evil is what goes against the character of God. So when we were breathed life into by God, what passed on to us, an echo of God in us, is we still have an innate sense of his character, so we know when we do something wrong because it's not what he would have done. And we say this even as people, but we put it in the first person. When we do something wrong, we tell people, hey, I'm sorry, I messed up, but that's not me, right? I was watching The Office the other day, and Angela cheats on Andy, and she goes, that doesn't sound like me, does it? But she did, right? But when we say it doesn't sound like me, or that's just not me, what do we really mean? On a more cosmic level, when we make the assertion, I know I messed up, but that's not who I am. What are we actually saying? I know I messed up, but that's not who God is. Look, I know I screwed up. I knew what the math was supposed to be. I got the math wrong. I know I messed up, but that's not who God is. And when we lift up someone as a hero, we go, man, that person is so good. Or what they did was so good. But you'll find that when we call someone so good, it means it aligns with what is godly. When someone sacrifices their life to save someone else, we go, that is the truest show of love. Why? What's that a direct reflection of? Why do we hold that in the highest value in our world? You want to give someone the Medal of Honor? They must give up their life for someone else. Why do you think that's so important to us? Because Jesus gave up his life for someone else. It's a direct reflection of the echo of who God is. People I think that are the most important heroes. My best friend, Matthew Thompson, who was blown up in Afghanistan a couple years ago on an IED. He's a hero of mine because he gave up his life that I could experience freedom. What did Jesus do? He gave up his life that I might experience freedom. Our ethics are a direct reflection of the God revealed in the biblical text. It's consistent in the worldview. And when a culture gets it wrong, when a culture says it's okay to put babies on pyres and burn them to death, we as other cultures can look in and go, that is wrong intrinsically. And when someone who has been brainwashed to think that is pulled out into a neutral ground, they look back at that and go, that's not okay. Amy Smart, Stockholm Syndrome, she was kidnapped and she was with her captors for a number of years. When she came to get rescued, she didn't want to leave. She wanted to stay with her captors. They took her out and got her emotional counseling. And in that emotional counseling, she went back and accused her captor and put them on trial and then witnessed against them and put them in jail for life. Why? Because you're right. When someone claims to be the position of morality in your life and they've brainwashed you to do that, you might go for a season, this is what is good and this is what is bad. You go against the innateness of who you are. But you pull someone outside of that and it goes right back. Like outside of psychopathy and sociopathy, we find the exact same thing to be true. People revert to their default setting, which is that was not good. That was not okay. Why is it not okay? Why is it universally not okay? Because we are all made in the image of God. We all were, even if you're an atheist. The reason that you have an inconsistency in your worldview is you're fighting against who you were made to be. Because he made you to look like him. He made you to be like him. He made you to think like him. And so when we have these moralistic dilemmas where we go, well, it's this and it's that, it always falls apart until you ground it in the character of someone. Let me show you some of these things. Why is it important to honor your father and mother? Commandment number 5 that God gives. The commandments he gives aren't, well, here's who I am and here's who you ought to be. Every commandment is, here is who I am. Be like me, and it's moral. Be unlike me, and it's wrong. Honor your father and mother. Why? Because God is a family. He puts a high value on the strength of physical families. You should not murder. Why? Because God loves and respects humans. As a creator of life, he values and can decide then if it should be taken. You shall not commit adultery. Why? Because it's not good to sleep with people? No, because God is faithful. And when we are unfaithful, we are being ungodly. That's why we all go, adultery is wrong. That's why couples hide their adultery. You might go, well, monogamy is archaic and it's leftover and it shouldn't be that way. Monogamy is unnatural. And then you cheat on your boyfriend and you hide it. Why? Because you're fighting against what you know to be true, which is the faithfulness of God resides in you even if you don't acknowledge it. Faithfulness is an ethic. Why is it an ethic? Because it is godly. You shall not steal. Why? Because God is giving. God is not here taking from us. He is here giving to us. Do not bear false witness. Why? Because John 14:6, he is the way, the truth, and the life. Why don't you lie? Because God is truth. And when you lie, you're going against who he is. You shall not covet. Why? Because he's pure and perfect. He owns everything. His intentions are always pure, which means when our intentions are impure, we're being ungodly. This is the ethic of Christianity. It's not God going, a Euthyphroian dilemma, which says, well, God looks at things and goes, that's right, that's wrong, arbitrarily. Right and wrong is just him mirror imaged onto a page called the law. The 10 Commandments are God going, let me pull out who I am and put it on paper. And when we do like who he is, it's good. And when we do opposite of who he is, it's bad. It's just that simple. And don't create the ad ignorantium argument of, well, that's just too simple. Who said this has to be complicated? A subjective morality is infinitely complicated, right? Well, who gets to decide? Who gets to? It's grounded in an unchanging divine being is remarkably uncomplicated, but I think it ought to be. We don't have time to go into the next. You can pull it up here. We'll be talking about this at the forum here in a few minutes when it starts in 11 minutes. But the problem of evil, this was like the atheist slam dunk. If God is good, why is there evil in the world? Well, if God is good, why do bad things happen to good people is another way that's phrased. And here's the traditional objection to God's existence via the problem of evil. This is the most poignant, commonly produced argument against God's existence. Outside of he can't exist presuppositionally. This has been all but thwarted. People don't even really use this anymore because of a man named Alvin Plantinga who put up a free will defense. Before he did that, when I was studying atheism and I would have called myself an atheist, I was going against God. I looked at this and I was trying to argue with people, but I always found the exact same objections over and over again. So I wrote down my own objections to it. You can see on this next slide. This is why I stopped using this with Christians when I was an atheist, because I realized I was assuming a whole bunch of stuff. The first objection, actually I can't go through this. We're over time. But we're gonna start our forum by talking through that concept of if God is good, why is there evil in the world? What about cancer? Why do bad things happen to good people? All these different questions. So, guys, thanks for continuing to engage in the conversation. We're gonna take a 10-minute break now. You guys are free to go home. If you don't have questions or whatever, do that. If you wanna come back and challenge some of that stuff, we'll be spending 1 hour starting at 12:30 to 1:30 in here, diving next level with this concept. We love you guys. We'll see you guys then.